It was supposed to be a typical Saturday evening, quiet, relaxed, the kind of night I'd grown to appreciate after a busy week at work. Sarah had just returned from her weekend trip with Lucas, her gym trainer. She had been so excited about it. Just a little getaway to focus on fitness, she'd said, but something about the way she said it felt off. I shrugged it off, thinking I was just being paranoid. When I came home that night, I immediately noticed the silence in the house. No TV playing in the background, no sound of Sarah bustling around in the kitchen like usual. As I walked further in, I spotted her shoes by the door, neatly lined up beside her bag, but I couldn't hear any movement from upstairs. I thought she was unpacking. But then, I saw her phone on the kitchen counter, screen face up, her last message open. Had the best time today. Can't wait for tomorrow. The text wasn't to me. It wasn't even to a friend. It was from Lucas. A wave of unease washed over me. I tried to shake it off, thinking it was nothing, but there was a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. I walked upstairs slowly, my heart pounding a little faster with each step. I found Sarah sitting on our bed, unpacking her bag. She was smiling, but her eyes were distant, like she was thinking about something, or someone else. "Hey, how was the trip?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the tension in my own voice. She looked up, her smile faltering for a second before it returned, this time a little too quickly. "It was great," she said, her voice too upbeat. "Lucas is such a great trainer. We really pushed each other this weekend." I nodded, still trying to make sense of the gnawing feeling in my gut. But then she added something strange. "I'm really glad we did this. You know, I think I really needed to get away for a bit." I frowned. "Away from me?" She froze for a moment, then quickly changed the subject. "Let's just relax tonight. It's been a long weekend." But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, something bigger than I could see. And it was only when I looked at her phone again, the same message from Lucas still lingering, that I started to realize, this was more than just a fitness trip. Something had happened while she was away, something I wasn't ready to confront. But the truth was closer than I thought. The following days after Sarah returned were a strange mixture of normalcy and discomfort. I kept going through the motions, work, dinner, quiet evenings, but there was a palpable tension in the air between us. Sarah seemed distracted, her usual energy replaced by a more distant demeanor. She would smile, talk, laugh even, but I could tell something was different. Every time I tried to engage her in conversation, she would dodge or change the subject, as though she was protecting something from me. And I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in my gut, the sinking suspicion that had only grown stronger since that night. The message on her phone, her offhanded remark about needing a getaway, and her sudden reluctance to talk about the trip had all planted seeds of doubt in my mind. But I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I had to know for sure. I had to figure out what was really going on. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. It wasn't easy, but I began to look at things more carefully, pay attention to the details I had missed before. I was starting to notice things that I hadn't noticed in the past, the way Sarah would check her phone nervously when I walked into the room, the fact that she'd stop texting when I came near. Little things, but they didn't escape me anymore. And most glaring of all, she seemed to avoid me more than ever. One evening, after dinner, when Sarah excused herself to work on something in her office, I took a deep breath and grabbed her phone from the counter where she'd left it. I was careful, methodical. I knew I couldn't just go through her messages without reason. But this time, I couldn't hold back. There was too much uncertainty in my mind. As I unlocked the phone, I felt a chill run through me. It wasn't so much the thought of invading her privacy, it was the sense of impending dread. I scrolled through her messages, stopping when I saw a familiar name, Lucas. There it was again. The same messages. But this time, they were different. One message stood out among the rest: "Tonight was amazing. Can't wait to do it again. I'm falling for you." My heart stopped. I stared at the words on the screen, rereading them over and over, hoping they would somehow change, but they didn't. There was no mistaking it. It was clear. My wife, the woman I trusted, the person I had shared my life with for years, was in the middle of an affair. I couldn't breathe. The room felt like it was closing in on me. I quickly put her phone back, trying to compose myself, but the truth was like a weight crushing my chest. I had to confront her. There was no other option now. As I walked to the office, I could feel my pulse racing. My mind was reeling with 1,000 questions. What had happened between them? How long had this been going on? What was I supposed to do now? The shock of the discovery had left me dizzy, but I knew I couldn't let this go on any longer. I had to face her. When I entered the office, Sarah was sitting at her desk, typing away on her laptop. She looked up, surprised to see me. "Hey, is everything okay?" she asked, her tone still light, but I could hear the subtle tremor in her voice. She knew something was up. "I need to talk to you," I said, my voice low, controlled. I wasn't sure if I was even capable of raising my voice in that moment. I just knew that I had to get the words out. She frowned and closed her laptop, her hands gripping the edges of the desk. "What's wrong?" Her face was a picture of concern, but I could see the defensiveness in her eyes. She was bracing herself. "I know about you and Lucas," I said flatly, my eyes locking onto hers. She froze, her breath hitching for a split second before she quickly looked away, her lips pressed tight. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the realization that the secret she had worked so hard to protect had finally been exposed. She didn't say anything at first, and for a long moment, the silence between us felt suffocating. "Are you going to say something?" I demanded, the hurt finally seeping through the cracks in my voice. I hadn't meant to sound angry, but I couldn't help it. The betrayal was too much. She hesitated for a moment, her eyes flicking to the door, then back to me. "It's not what you think," she began, her voice quiet, almost shaky. "I never wanted you to find out this way." I couldn't hold back the bitterness that seeped into my words. "Then how did you want me to find out? Would you have kept lying to me if I hadn't seen the messages?" She stood up from her chair, clearly struggling with her words. I could see that she was trying to formulate an explanation, but the more she fumbled, the more frustrated I became. I wasn't sure how much more of this I could take. The person I loved was standing in front of me, and yet, she felt like a stranger. "I didn't plan this," she said finally, her voice cracking. "I swear, I didn't want this to happen. But I just needed someone who understood me. Lucas, he's different. He made me feel alive again. I don't know how it got to this point." The words felt like a punch in the gut. Alive? What did that mean? What had I been to her all this time? A source of stability? A convenience? I could feel the anger building inside me, but I forced myself to remain calm. I couldn't lose control now, not when I was so close to understanding what had really happened. "I need you to explain something else to me," I said, my voice quieter now. "How long has this been going on? How long have you been seeing him?" She swallowed hard, her gaze shifting to the floor as though she couldn't bear to look at me. "It started a few months ago," she admitted, her voice small. "At first, it was just about the workouts. But, it got more personal. We started talking more, spending time together outside of the gym. And one thing led to another. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Months? How could she have kept this from me for so long? I had trusted her with everything. She was my partner, my best friend, and now I was learning that all of it had been a lie. "So, this trip?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Was it just another excuse to be with him? Her face went pale, and she nodded slowly, unable to meet my gaze. Yes. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, but I didn't know how to stop it. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. My mind was swirling, caught in a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't even name. Betrayal. Anger. Sadness. All I had ever known was a lie. Well, I said finally, my voice bitter with a mix of disbelief and pain, I guess now you don't have to hide it anymore. You've made your choice. With that, I turned and walked out, not looking back. But inside, everything was crumbling. The days following our confrontation were a blur. I stayed at home, locked away in my thoughts, processing everything that had happened. Sarah barely spoke to me. Her avoidance was like a wall, an invisible barrier between us that no amount of conversation seemed to break down. I couldn't look at her without seeing the betrayal in her eyes, and she, in turn, seemed unable to look me in the eye at all. It was as if the love we had once shared was slipping away, crumbling to dust before my very eyes. I had never felt so betrayed, so completely alone. I thought back to all the years we had spent together, our first date, our wedding day, the times we had laughed, cried, and built a life together. And now, it was as if that life had been nothing more than a carefully constructed illusion. The woman I had trusted with my heart had shattered that trust in an instant, and I didn't know how to cope with the emotional wreckage that followed. But as much as I wanted to scream, to shout, to demand answers from her, I couldn't help but feel a sense of calm growing inside me. It wasn't that I had forgiven her, it was the opposite. I was more certain than ever that I needed to take control of my own life, to make a decision that wasn't about appeasing her or holding on to a marriage that had been built on lies. I needed clarity. I needed the truth, every last detail. I had to know how deep this betrayal ran, how far Sarah had gone. The affair with Lucas was one thing, but I had a gut feeling that there was more to the story than she had let on. Something was off, and I wasn't going to stop until I figured it out. One evening, after Sarah had gone to bed, I found myself pacing the living room. I couldn't sleep, my mind racing with all the unanswered questions. I kept thinking about their trip, the lies she had told me, and how Lucas was now a part of our lives in ways I couldn't even comprehend. There was something strange about it all, the way she had spoken about him, the way she looked when she mentioned his name. I was certain there was more going on between them than she was admitting. That night, I decided to do something I had never considered before, I would track down Lucas. I didn't know where to start, but I knew I had to find him. He was the key to everything, the missing piece of the puzzle. If I could get answers from him, maybe I would understand why Sarah had betrayed me, and what exactly had happened between them. The next day, I gathered my thoughts and set out to track him down. I wasn't sure where he lived or worked, but I had one clue, the gym where Sarah had met him. It was a long shot, but it was all I had. The gym was located in a quiet part of the city, tucked away in an industrial area, far from the usual hustle and bustle. As I drove toward it, a mix of dread and determination settled in my chest. I had no idea what I was walking into, but I couldn't turn back now. When I arrived, I parked my car a few blocks away and made my way toward the building. The gym was quiet, almost empty, with just a few people working out in the distance. I walked up to the front desk, my heart racing. The receptionist was a young woman who looked up at me as I approached. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone polite but cautious. "I'm looking for Lucas," I said, my voice calm but firm. "Can you tell me where I can find him?" The receptionist hesitated for a moment before nodding. "He's in the back, training someone. If you want, I can let him know you're here." "No," I said quickly, not wanting to reveal too much. "I'll wait for him." She nodded and went about her work, and I stood there, my mind spinning. Every moment felt like an eternity. I couldn't believe what I was about to do, but I was beyond caring. I had to know the truth. After what felt like an hour, Lucas finally walked through the door, wiping sweat from his brow as he stepped into the lobby. He was taller than I expected, muscular, with a confident stride. He looked like the type of guy who was used to being the center of attention, unlike me, a guy who had always been content to blend into the background. As soon as his eyes landed on me, he froze. There was a moment of recognition in his eyes, followed by a flash of something else, guilt? Panic? I couldn't be sure, but it was enough to make my blood run cold. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice smooth but guarded. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "You're Lucas, right? The personal trainer?" He nodded, still sizing me up. "Yeah, that's me. Who are you?" "I'm Sarah's husband," I said, the words tasting like acid on my tongue. "And I need to talk to you." For a moment, he didn't speak, just stared at me as though weighing his options. The silence between us was thick with tension, and I could tell that he wasn't sure how to respond. I could see the guilt in his eyes now. He knew exactly why I was there. "I don't think this is a good idea," Lucas finally said, his voice quiet but insistent. "Too bad," I shot back, my anger flaring. "I don't care what you think. I need to know what's been going on between you and my wife." He sighed, glancing around as if hoping someone would intervene, but we were alone. "Look, man," he started, his tone softer now, "I didn't plan any of this. I never meant for it to get out of hand. But Sarah, she's been going through some stuff, and we connected. It just happened." I could feel my fists clench at my sides. "You don't get it, do you? My wife is married to me. Not you. And you took advantage of that." Lucas ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, okay? I never wanted to hurt you. But things just happened. I didn't force her into anything." "That's not the point," I snapped, stepping closer. "The point is, you've been lying to me. You've been sneaking around with my wife. And I deserve to know why. What did you do to her?" Lucas opened his mouth, but before he could respond, a voice interrupted us. "Everything you want to know is right in front of you." I turned to see Sarah standing at the entrance, her eyes wide and filled with something I couldn't read. There was a moment of silence before she took a step forward. "You wanted to know the truth, didn't you?" she said softly, her voice trembling. "Well, here it is. I've been seeing Lucas for the last 6 months. It wasn't just the gym. It wasn't just a fling. I'm in love with him. I never wanted you to find out this way, but it's time. I've been living a lie, and so have you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had suspected, yes, but hearing her say it aloud, hearing her confirm everything, was like the final, devastating blow. The woman I loved, the woman I had trusted more than anything, was in love with another man. For a moment, everything went black. I couldn't hear her anymore, couldn't focus on the words. I just stood there, numb, as my entire world crumbled around me. Sarah was crying now, tears streaking down her face. But it didn't matter. There was no going back from this. "Why?" I managed to choke out, my voice breaking. "Why him? Why us?" She shook her head, her sobs quiet but deep. "I don't know. I don't know. But I'm done. I've been living a lie for so long. I can't do it anymore." I couldn't bring myself to look at her. I had nothing left to say. Everything had changed, and there was no going back. The silence in the gym felt suffocating, as if the weight of the truth had fallen over all of us, smothering any hope of reconciliation. I stood there, numb, struggling to process the flood of emotions surging through me. The life I thought I knew had been shattered in an instant, and I couldn't help but feel as though the person I had married was now a stranger. The woman I had shared my deepest moments with, the woman I had trusted with everything, was in love with another man. Lucas was standing there, awkwardly shifting his weight from one foot to the other, clearly uncomfortable but offering no further words. I wanted to lash out, to scream, to demand he leave, but part of me knew that my anger wasn't just directed at him. It was at Sarah, too. She was the one who had chosen this path. She was the one who had let the betrayal unfold, day by day, until it exploded in front of me. Sarah stood behind me now, still trembling. She wasn't even looking at me, but I could feel the weight of her regret, her guilt, radiating from her. I had never seen her like this before, vulnerable, lost, a shell of the confident woman I had once known. I wanted to hate her, to despise her for everything she had done, but there was a part of me, small and fragile, that still wanted to understand. How did we get here? How did the woman I married become someone so unrecognizable? I didn't want to hurt you, Sarah's voice cracked, her words barely audible as she stepped closer. I never wanted to betray you. I don't know. I don't know how things got so messed up. I looked at her, the words on the tip of my tongue, but nothing came out. What could I say? The truth was there, hanging in the air like a heavy mist, and nothing I could say would change the reality of it. She had made her choice. She had chosen Lucas, and there was no undoing that. No second chances. But even in that moment of utter betrayal, I couldn't bring myself to say the words I thought I would. I couldn't say, I hate you. I couldn't say, I'm leaving you. Part of me wanted to destroy everything between us, to burn it all down, but another part of me was caught in the tangled web of our shared history, our memories, the love we had once had. I didn't know how to move forward, and I didn't know if I ever would. I need some time, I said, my voice sounding hollow in my own ears. I can't do this right now. I need to think. Sarah nodded, her eyes filled with unshed tears, but she didn't try to stop me. She didn't argue, didn't plead for my forgiveness. She just stood there, waiting for me to make the next move. I don't know if she expected me to forgive her, if she even thought there was any way back from this, but I wasn't ready to make that decision yet. I couldn't. I turned to leave the gym, my feet heavy, my mind reeling. The door closed behind me with a soft thud, and I was once again alone in the world. But this time, I wasn't sure what my world was anymore. The person I had built my life with was gone, and in her place was someone else. Someone who had chosen to betray everything we had worked for, without hesitation. I walked through the empty streets, the night air cool against my skin, trying to make sense of the chaos in my mind. Was it possible to rebuild what we had? Was it possible to forgive her for what she had done? Or was this the end of the road? I didn't have any answers, not yet. Maybe I never would. But as I walked, I couldn't help but wonder what would happen if I let go of all the pain, all the anger, and gave myself the freedom to move on. I had always been the one holding on to the past, the memories, the love we once shared. But maybe it was time to let go. Maybe it was time to find myself again, outside of her shadow, outside of our broken marriage. As I reached my car, I paused for a moment, staring at the road ahead. There was no clear direction, no right or wrong way forward. But one thing was certain, my life would never be the same. And neither would Sarah's. The truth had come to light, but the future remained uncertain. Would we rebuild what had been torn apart, or would we drift further apart, each of us forever changed by the choices we had made? Only time would tell. But for now, all I could do was take the next step. One step at a time.